All right, so welcome folks to our next uplifting conversations where we invite alumni from Holy Cross to engage with students on information about a range of topics intersecting with their identities. And so in continuing the celebration from this past week on National First Gen College Celebration Day, tonight's topic is First Gen realities during the pandemic, balancing family, job searches, imposter syndrome, COVID, and so much more. So I'm going to kick it off and ask our panelists to introduce themselves before we get into our questions. So David, would you like to start?
Hi, everyone. My name is David Rodriguez. I'm class of 2019, and I'm currently in my house in Drake, Massachusetts.
Awesome. Vivian.
Hi everyone, I'm Vivian, also class of 2019, also zooming in from my house in Westboro, Massachusetts.
Ian Kelly.
Hi everyone, my name is Ian Kelly, also class of 2019, and I'm right now in New York.
And Casey.
Hi, I'm Casey. I'm class of 2017 actually, and I'm right now in Brockton, Mass.
Awesome, thank you so much. So the first question we have for the panelists, what was your time on the Hill like as a first gen college student?
For me, the first few years at Holy Cross were really tough because there weren't that many first gen resources. I felt like even as far as like my living situation, my roommate and a lot of her friends came from a completely different walk of life than I did. That's something I was very unfamiliar with. I found it really hard to find folks that related to me. I obviously was the first person in my family to go to college, and I think there's a lot of baggage that comes with that when you don't really have family to help you out in the way that a lot of other students do. And then it adds like a whole other layer of complication. You know, college is already hard enough, and then when you have to figure it out on your own on top of it, makes it 10 times harder.
Yeah, I'll add to that. For me, I feel like it was a little bit confusing, but I ended up going to Holy Cross with some good friends like that I already knew. So it was nice to we were all experiencing the same things together. But in general, I think it wasn't so much about maybe it was kind of a combination of resources, but it's also like just trying to figure things out on your own. Like you can't go to your parents. Like if I go to my mom talking about like exams and things, she's like, what is that, like what are you talking about? Like she didn't really understand that. Classes she wouldn't understand, like she would be like, are you in class right now? But like I'm on campus, but she's like, but you're at school? Like she wouldn't get any of those terms. So it was definitely hard in that aspect. But now that I think about it, it was in a way I made it my own. Like I didn't have, although I wish I did have my parents who to understand that aspect, it was kind of nice now to know about it because I'm like, I made it my own and I understood it in the way that I wanted to understand it. And then now in the future, even with my siblings, they have me there to be able to go to for questions. And then in the future with my kids, like I'm super excited to be like, yeah, like I went to college, like I can tell you about this. So like it was, it was like there was negative parts to it, but there's also like a good part that came out of it.
Yeah, kind of like building off of that too, when you're like a first gen student, like you're the first doing like everything, and experiencing everything. So it's kind of hard to relate that back because, in high school, I was always like in school, then I did like my sport. And then when I got home, I did my homework, right? And that was all I did. And then when, you get to Holy Cross and you're only taking 4 classes, right? It's hard to like translate like, oh, the reason I'm taking 4 classes is because they're 4 like hard classes. It's not like I'm taking 4 easy classes and you compare it to like other people who are at other colleges and they take like 6 or 7 or more depending on what their semester is like, and then kind of explaining to your parents and your family, well, I'm actually doing like a lot of stuff, is why it's harder. Like for me personally, I was like an A student in high school, but then started rolling in B's when I got to Holy Cross. And so it's not like I'm not trying or like not succeeding, is that like this is just a different level of education and stuff. But I think it's also really cool because kind of like Jan Kelly said, like you make it your own thing. That's a lot about what college is, right? We might all have gone to like Holy Cross, but like we all did like different things, and you make it your own journey, and it's really nice to be able to do that.
Yeah, and I think just again building off of what David was saying, it was definitely tough, like explaining to my parents why I chose the courses that I did, how I was getting the grades I was getting, because coming at least from my family and the background that we have, like they have very high expectations of me, and in high school things were a lot easier than they were at Holy Cross. And obviously it is such an academically rigorous school that it's really hard to explain to them why my grades might be slipping or why I'm deciding to go one route versus another. And so it's really tough to try to get them to understand from my perspective. And no matter how many times, I would be crying to them, being like, oh my God, like I'm gonna fail this class, like freaking out, or try and tell them like this is why I want to do this, like this is my passion, it just wouldn't resonate with them, which is tough. And there's definitely been times where I didn't listen to them, and I made the wrong choice. But I also think that that's what being a first gen is making those decisions on your own and then making those mistakes and learning from them, because we don't have anyone else to look back on as kind of like a role model of sorts, beyond just like our parents being our parents and looking up to them. So it was really interesting, exactly like what Dave and Young Kelly was saying, to pave my own path and kind of build the life that I want to build and make a name for myself, and kind of see like what do I want Vivian to be remembered for on campus, like what do I want my college experience to be like as a first gen student, and what do I want to look back on and tell my kids about, like what is that experience that I want to resonate within me. So I definitely think there are positives, but it definitely was really tough because you just don't have any of the resources. Monetarily is one aspect, but then also just the lack of support, because there is such a big gap in understanding and like cultural differences and stuff.
Thank you all so much for sharing. So in thinking about current first gen students here at Holy Cross right now, what piece of advice to our current first gen students navigating their college career during the time of the pandemic and beyond that, what would that advice be?
I'll start. I think one of the biggest things that pops into my mind is to be resilient. It's definitely easier said than done, but you just have to understand that, everyone's kind of going through it, but everyone's story and everyone's struggles are very much different. But one, yours are completely valid, regardless of how big or small they might seem to someone else. But then two is that as long as you just remain positive and keep on the path and understand where your goals and what you want kind of your path to look like, then it will eventually work out. And that although this might feel like, like we were talking about, it's almost been a year since this all happened, it still is a year in the grand scheme of things, and things will start to get better as we're kind of seeing it all start to develop. But just try and keep your head up and know that this isn't going to be the end all be all. And, if a grade or two slips, or if things don't work out the way you want them to, we're only in our early 20s. There's so much more beyond just these next couple of years or however many years you have left in school. And that these last 4 years in school, or this last year that in the middle of this pandemic, is not going to define your life. It's not going to make or break anything you do. And you have so much more to give, and you have so much more left in your life to kind of develop yourself and fix everything that might have not gone the way you had wanted it to go. But it's definitely tough, and you have to understand that everyone knows that if you're a college student during COVID, like you did something that no one else has ever done. It's unprecedented. So that's also something you have to be proud of yourself for being able to do, and kind of come out of it and understanding that you were able to make it through it, and no one else knows what you went through except for, yourself and whoever else was with you during that experience.
I mean, kind of building off of that, a little bit more on like the grade doesn't matter, right? Like you don't kill yourself for that A, or like, you don't even have to kill yourself for that B, right? Like from the students I've talked to, who I'm still connected with, they all say the same thing. Like it's harder, right? And Holy Cross was already really hard when it was just regular, Holy Cross, not like Holy Zoom. Like it's wild what you guys are doing. And coming from someone who, again, I didn't like kill myself for the grade, right? Like when I like interviewed for jobs, or like when at my current job, no one looked at my transcript, right? Like I didn't hand that in with my resume, right? I just thought like, this is what I did in college, right? This is what I studied about. These are like my interests. And they were like, okay, cool. Like, I think you'd be a great part of the team. And, I got hired, and then, you learn as you go in a job, right? It's not like you get to a job and then you have to do what is expected right away. And so, in times like this where it's so hard, like to balance home life, to balance everything else, put yourself first.
I want to play off what you just said and as well reiterate that you are never, ever, ever going to have to reveal your GPA. I've been interviewing for many years and no one has ever cared what number I was in my graduating class or what my GPA was. Honestly, people look at my resume and they say, "Oh, wow, you went to Holy Cross. Like I heard that's a really good school, you know, good for you." Um, so definitely don't stress about the grade that you're getting. I know that that's way easier said than done. But as Vivian was saying earlier, like for me, it was really hard to explain to my dad why I went from making straight A's to like honestly like C's and like dropping out of classes and everything like that. I'm not even going to sugarcoat it. He just really didn't understand a lot of the choices that I had to make while I was in school. But at the end of the day, you know, it's your journey. You're the one who has to live it, and you have to make the decision that you feel is best for you. Navigating your college career right now is obviously very, very strange, and I've never experienced it myself, so maybe my advice isn't the best, but I would say that something I didn't do well enough when I was at Holy Cross was networking and really seeking out people who could help me. I always said to people that I discussed being first gen with that like I didn't even know what questions to ask about my college experience, never mind who to ask them to. I think if I had focused better on building those relationships out with people and different departments on campus, then I might have been able to find resources to help guide me and, you know, finding the right questions to ask, if that makes sense.
To add on to that, obviously, I mean, I'm going to school, like I'm getting my graduate degree, and it's a little bit tough trying to manage and do remote learning. I feel like I can't concentrate. There's just too much going on. But every single time I find myself in distress and wanting to just like give up, because let me tell you, the amount of times I've said, you know what, I'm just gonna quit right here, right now. I just think about the fact that, you know, I have to be really patient. And at the end of the day, everything always works out the way that it needs to work out. And we've been learning to adapt. Like, I'm just amazed at how quickly people have been able to adapt since everything has happened. But I think one thing that you need to take out of, and one thing that I've learned throughout Holy Cross, is just keeping your people close. Even though right now everything's virtual, do Zoom sessions with your friends, like do it all, like do all of that talk, have conversations, because at the end of the day, you know, a year from now, you're going to have those relationships. And the only thing I remember from Holy Cross, it's not those nights that I stayed up crying about an assignment. It's literally the nights that I've stayed up laughing with friends, or even like crying with friends about assignments. It's not really the assignment itself or the work itself. And like many of you have mentioned, it's like, honestly, the grade doesn't really matter as much as we think it does at the moment. So really just focus on yourself mentally, physically, emotionally, especially with whatever's going on right now. It's tough already. You shouldn't be putting yourself through so much stress when you're already going through stress because of the world and what's happening around us. So really just be patient with yourself and do things that make you happy. And that's it.
Thank you all so much for that, those amazing pieces of advice. Switching gears a little bit, so the imposter syndrome is something that a lot of first gen folks face. And for those who aren't familiar with the imposter syndrome, it's that idea of having doubts about your skills, your talents, accomplishments, and this like persistent internalized fear of being exposed as a fraud. For the panelists, how do you say the imposter syndrome shows up in your life, and what do you do to actively combat that?
Well, I can start because I was literally having a conversation with a coworker Wednesday about this. Literally, it was intense. Because before I went into Holy Cross, I think David talked a little bit about this, but literally I was all straight A's. And all my life, I felt like I had to be perfect because that's just how I was seen as super smart. I was seen as somebody, you know, that I always had my life together. So then I went to Holy Cross. And it's funny because at Holy Cross, even I know I dropped out of one class. I got like a D in one class, and like I was just like, oh my God, I can't even believe this happened. But I never even told my family about it because I was like, you know what? I'm gonna just let it go. It doesn't matter. But now currently, I feel like I have to prove myself all the time. Well, since I've been reflecting a lot about it in the past couple of months, but before I felt like I had to prove myself all the time and be on top of everything and like make sure that everything was perfect and make sure that I was doing everything on time and like this and that. And it was just very, very overwhelming. And I felt like if I slacked off, people would be like, okay, what's going on with her? Especially with like at my job right now, I feel like, okay, I would be looked at like as somebody that's not good enough to be here or somebody that's not qualified enough in order like to do this work. And then I started reflecting and I'm like, why does it matter what other people think of me right now? Like I know how far I've come. I know what I do. I know what I'm capable of. I feel like I felt like I was so scared of failure that I didn't even let myself acknowledge the fact that I was actually doing so much for myself. And this is something that I'm still working on right now because even in the past, I remember when it was like an awards thing that was happening for seniors at Holy Cross. And I ended up getting this award for like a women's leadership award. And I was like, no, I don't want to go up. Like, why would I? Like I was telling Rob, he was at Holy Cross. I was telling him, I'm like, no, I don't want to go up. Like, why would I want to go up to get this award? And I'm just like, that makes me scared. Like, why would I need, and then I was thinking in my head, so I'm like, I feel like I need to do more. Like I don't deserve this. And that's a lot of the things that kept going in my head even after I graduated, because I'm like, I feel like I'm not doing enough, or I need to do more. I don't deserve this success. Why is it that I'm getting this and that? So it's something that I've been personally working hard at. It's like acknowledging the fact that I've done so much already and that it's okay to fail. It's okay to not be perfect at everything. And since I've changed that mindset, everything has become so much easier for me. Because before I was just so stuck on like the failure and the fear of failure, not even the fact that it happened. It's like I was already making it happen in my head. But also just everybody who's hearing this, really acknowledge yourself and all that you do, because even if it's the smallest thing, acknowledge yourself and, be happy for yourself and be proud of yourself, because like you did that. Nobody did it for you. You did that. You deserve it. And that's it. So that's my advice on that.
I was gonna say, young Kelly's advice really rings true for me, because for me, imposter syndrome hits in waves depending on like what I'm struggling with at the time. Sometimes some months I'll be doing great, and then the next month I'm telling myself that I'm not worthy of the things that I've logically know that I've earned, and proven myself to be good enough for. And so when I do have those tough moments, like young Kelly said, just remembering that like you really have earned it. You've got yourself into this position somehow. It wasn't by accident. It was by hard work, and you deserve all of the good things that are coming to you. I can relate to this a lot right now because I just started a new job and I'm really bad at Excel. I'm going to say that openly. I'm like really, really bad at it. I've tried to teach myself and it doesn't click in my brain for whatever reason. So I have no idea how I ended up in accounting. That wasn't my college major, but that's what I do for a living. And I've been doing it for 3 years now. And I've been fortunate enough not to need Excel too much, but in this new job, I definitely do. So I got assigned this project yesterday, and I honestly was terrified. Like I was really, really scared. And I was like, I'm going to have to tell them they shouldn't have given me this job. Like I can't do it. And I was just talking to my husband about it, and he was like, what are you talking about? Like there's never been a challenge that you faced while I've known you that you haven't been able to handle. He was like, get on your computer and do some research and figure it out. Like you're gonna figure it out. It might take you all night, but you're gonna do it, and you're gonna do it well. And sometimes you just need that push from another person. Sometimes you need that push from yourself. But at the end of the day, you got yourself into whatever position it is, or, course that you have been working on, or whatever. You got there because you earned it, and you just have to kind of get yourself out of that rut and remind yourself that you earned all of the good things that have come to you.
Yeah, and kind of like building off that, in my job right now, I work in advancement and alumni affairs at my old high school. And kind of before this, I was talking with Amy. I'm like, a lot of people from my job are leaving, not because they're like being fired or anything, because they're just looking at this as like a point in life to take a different direction and try something new, which is really great for them. But then like I'm like the only one left in the office. And then I start to think about like all the stuff that still needs to get done, and now how it falls in like onto my shoulders, and I'm just like, how? I'm like, this is impossible. Like I cannot do this, right? But then it's also that mentality of like, you know, I didn't know how to do a lot of things before, right? Like I didn't know how to, you know, when I got to like high school, I didn't know how to like take notes like the right way to study, right? So I learned how to do it. And then when I got to Holy Cross, I didn't know how to like, you know, do well in like a chemistry lab. And I had no idea, but you know, I still did it and still passed. And so with things like imposter syndrome, when you feel like you don't deserve it or like it's too much, like know that you have it with you clearly have it within yourself to be there, do it, and get it all done. Especially like for y'all, the students, you know, like more than a year ago, if you were asked like, oh, if we were theoretically in a pandemic, do you think that you'd be able to, you know, pass your classes and, you know, finish a semester off? And then probably a lot of people would have been like, no, that's wild, that's crazy. I wouldn't be able to do that. I mean, I don't think I would have been able to do what you guys are doing. But y'all also did it. Like class of 2020 was able to do it. Like class of 2021 is currently doing it, and all the other classes are doing it as well. Like you guys can do it, right? Just, you know, take it, you know, one step at a time. And, you know, if you need to take a step back, you know, breathe, be like, yeah, like I can do this, just like one step at a time. And that's all you can do, just take one step at a time, go forward, and you'll see that, you know, you'll accomplish and succeed.
Yeah, I think so. I'm currently working I just started a new job too in September, working in corporate America, doing tech sales, which is just as glamorous as it sounds. But I struggle with this a lot. It's always an internal like uphill battle with myself where I mentally always think that I'm going to be exposed, that kind of like what Casey was saying, that I'm incapable of doing my job, and that everything on my resume and everything I've ever said that I was able to achieve, they're going to realize is not true because I wasn't able to hit my numbers that month. Or, you know, I'm sometimes afraid to pick up the phone and make a cold call, and all those fears and all those kind of setbacks I've experienced in my life kind of all start creeping up, and they build up, and it's just this wave of I'm a failure. Like I'm not going to do well. I'm not going to hit my numbers. Everything's going to nothing's going to work out. Like, why did they hire me? Like all this positive reinforcement they've been giving me is just a lie. Like there's no way, all this stuff. And then I have to take a step back. And I honestly, like, I'm very transparent with my team lead and with my old manager. And I told them, I was like, look, like, this is what I was feeling. And it's really nice having people around with a really strong support system where they are very encouraging and they do always give me positive reinforcement. It sucks that sometimes I have to look for others for that, because I wish that I could be able to look internally and reflect and be like, no, Viv, like you're doing fine. Like this is you. This is the fruits of your labor. Like you really are doing all this amazing things. And, you know, they appreciate you and they want you here for a reason and they invested in you. But it's much easier said than done, obviously. And so whenever those thoughts and that kind of like waves of whatever emotions start to build up, I just try to take a step back and think about the things I was able to accomplish and just realize like, okay, what little thing did I do today that I might have not been able to do yesterday? Or what are these successes that I've been able to see recently, and just help myself reflect internally of like, you need to start thinking positively. And every time I think of a negative thought, just try and turn it into a positive thing. Because I always used to say like, fake it till you make it, which yeah, sometimes sure in certain situations, but I think that really just builds up on the imposter syndrome. And that's really what even makes it worse and exacerbates it at times, because you think, okay, well, I'm going to fake it. I'm just going to do it. And then people are going to start believing me. But then your lies and everything starts creeping up. And then you just kind of lose a true sense of self. And so I feel like there's been times where I definitely have experienced that, but just taking a step back and taking a moment for myself and just trying to talk myself out of it, or talk to my friends and talk to people, and just hearing that positive reinforcement really honestly helps at the end of the day. And looking at your successes on a piece of paper is also really helpful, and just being like, I did that. Like it's concrete proof that I did it.
I appreciate y'all's take on the imposter syndrome. And I think that's huge, Viv, what you're just talking about, celebrating all those small wins. And going back to something I think Ian Kelly is saying is like, I feel like as first gen folks, like even if you don't have the language, you're constantly like, oh my gosh, I was just talking about like the imposter syndrome this week, right? So I think in like staff meeting, and all three of us in OME identify as first gen, where you're constantly like, oh my gosh, like I don't know. But it's like, let's reflect on the last 8 months and see everything we were able to do, because as folks and thinking about students here at Holy Cross, it's like, y'all made it here. You all are doing it. And then like David said, I don't know if I'd be able to do this. You all are like actively doing and completing a semester online, Zoom University, Holy Zoom. So celebrate that, you know? So with that and kind of transitioning to the skills that we learn as first gens, what skills would you attribute to the first gen identity that you hold? And how would you highlight that in an interview?
For me, it's definitely my ability to like multitask and handle competing priorities. I worked full time all through college. I've been working since I was 16 years old. I've never not had a job until I got laid off due to COVID. So I think for me, I always try to highlight in interviews that like I'm really good at being able to switch gears and meet deadlines and all of those important skills that you need to be successful in anything. I think a lot of that comes from being first gen and like just knowing that there's always one more step that needs to be taken. You know, you don't really get a break very much as a first gen student, at least in my experience. And I think that it really suits me in a professional environment because I really like to like seek out projects and always keep myself busy. Like nothing drives me crazier than when your 8 hours feels like it's been 24. I want my shift to go by fast. I want to get home. I want to be able to do what I want to do. So just highlighting that in interviews that I like to keep myself busy and multitask and have lots of different things on my plate all the time has been something that employers have really liked about my experience.
Well, since I was just going through interview processes, this is a really interesting question because I felt like I highlighted a lot about my college experience and just being a person of color and then also being first gen. One of the first things that definitely pops into my mind is adaptability and being able to adapt to any situation or any sort of circumstance that's thrown my way. There's been so many times as a first gen student where, you know, like we were saying in the beginning, we don't know what's going on. We have no one to turn to, and we just kind of have to adapt, and we just have to figure out our own path and just, you know, make our own mistakes or trial and error. That's just kind of the name of the game when you have really no one there or no one with previous experiences that you can lean on. And kind of going off of that is being self-sufficient and not being someone who is heavily reliant on others, and being able to be independent and being able to be kind of like a natural born leader of sorts, because that, at least in my personal experience growing up, I didn't really ever have anyone ever there to tell me right from wrong, or like culturally, like this is how you do it or this is not, or, you know, what is expected of you. Like we don't know, you learn as you go. And like that also teaches you a lot about resilience, again, like I was saying in the beginning, of being able to put on your hard hat and take whatever beating you're about to get and just pick yourself back up regardless, and, you know, shake off the small things and reflect on the big things and learn your lessons that way. And then I think the last thing that I always touch upon is it gives you a really good understanding of different perspectives. You don't just have a kind of a one-way street type of view, but you understand things in a much more holistic and kind of worldly way. And because of all our backgrounds and, you know, the types of people that I interact with are people of all different backgrounds, all different ethnicity, sexual orientation, everything. And so you really just understand a plethora of information that I feel like people who might not expose themselves into those sort of situations because of their background or because of how comfortable they are with the types of people that they've grown up and known and have been around ever since they were little, they aren't able to kind of understand at times. And so I think that being first gen plays is such an important role. And whenever I talk about my like skill sets and my past experiences, and people love that, and I love to highlight it because it's something that everyone's story is so different. No one person's is the same at all, and everyone kind of goes through trials and tribulations that you might not even expect. And so it's really fascinating too to be able to tell your story, and then people learn from it and the lessons that you take from all that.
I think one thing that comes up in my head is just like passion. I feel like, as me speaking personally, you know, as an older sister, first generation, and a woman of color, I feel like everything that I do has always been with passion and care. And I think through Holy Cross, like if I do an assignment, I'm doing, even though most of them I just didn't want to do, but I know that I'm doing the best that I can do. And I think that's just so important in any job that you go into. It's like, it doesn't really matter, you know, what your skill sets are that much, or like, but it's like if you're very, very passionate and you do something with all that you can, that's all that matters so much. And I think employers and just people in general see that. And also just being able to adapt to things, being able, like, for example, I have to do this analysis thing at my job. And, you know, one day your boss tells you that you have to do this, and it's like, okay, it's like the night before or something, so you have to just do it and you get it done. And there, it's done. But one funny thing that I wanted to mention was that sometimes, and this might go into imposter syndrome, but sometimes I wish I can go back and not be such an overachiever, which is something you know, being a first gen brings, only because when you are an overachiever and you turn in something in early and it's great, you get it, it's like expected of you to keep doing that. So I'm like, damn, like I shouldn't have turned that in early and such a great paper. Like I shouldn't have done that. Because I'm just like, okay, now I'm expected to do this all the time. And if I don't do it all the time, and the one time that I don't turn it in a day before it's due or whatever, I'm gonna feel like a failure. But that's besides the point. I think just being a first gen in general, definitely being able to adapt to everything that life brings you. Because college, I didn't even know what college was. And, you know, I stepped onto Holy Cross, I stepped onto the campus, and I'm like, whoa, like what's going on here? Classes, don't know. Half of the words, that English words, what is that? So I was just like, there's just too much going on. But I still was able to get through it, and I still did it. And I think because being a first generation, and then you also hold that as an identity, because you're like, you know what, I'm first gen, I have to do it. And I think when you get that into your mindset, you're like, I have to do this, but not only for me, but for my siblings and my family. And that's something that just keeps you pushing and keeps that drive. And I just wanted to share something really quick, because my sister sent me a letter that she wrote for her school, that she's talking about me, and I cried when I was in class in the morning. And she said just something quick. She's like, I admire this of my sister because she has never given up. She's always trying no matter what. And that's what I love most about her. So like every single time, like when I see things like this, I like get emotional, because it's obviously greater than you. And like being a first generation, you know this, like, you know that it's more than just you. And I think that's like one of the most beautiful things about it. So yeah.
Yeah, I think I would agree with like what everyone said. And I think that what's like very interesting, like when you think about it, a lot of people come from like their own little bubbles, right? Like, you know, their own little families, and they go to the same school, and like everyone at the same school has like the same experience, and then, you know, that transitions into college. But when you're a first gen, like you don't necessarily like, you're like one bubble is kind of like everything, right? Because you're doing everything, and you facing a lot of different things, not only with like your school, or like when you become more like an adult, you like your job, but like, you know, your family, and you know, things that like just happen in life. And you know, as a first gen, you know, I always feel like everyone who I always knew, and like everyone at Holy Cross, like everyone just dove in. Like, you know, if you didn't know anything, like you just like, all right, well, let's go do it, right? Like, and see what happens, right? And when, you know, that type of mentality doesn't come with, you know, just like a regular upbringing, right? Like you get that from being the first to do like anything and everything. And that's like something you can, you know, you can rarely teach, and something that, you know, jobs really love to see, right? Because, you know, people always ask me like, oh, are you like doing okay? Like, is this too much work? Is this like, you know, like communicate if like you need a break and stuff. And honestly, like kind of like opposite of Young Kelly, like I haven't given like my full 100% at work, because I know that like I can do like way more, because like I worked on campus, I was like part of the clubs, I was a co-chair, right, a mentor, you know, on top of taking the 4 classes, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm like, I can do a lot more, right? But I'm doing everything like well, and everyone's like, oh yeah, that's great, like awesome, keep going. And I'm like, yeah, because I know like that's the skill set that I got from being a first gen. And you know, you're always going to take that into like everything else you do in life.
That was like absolutely beautiful. Like everyone's answer. I absolutely love 2 things that I really wanted to kind of highlight and uplift. The last thing that you were just saying, David, about the skills that first gen folks learn and hold because of their experiences rarely can be taught. And thus, it is so huge to be able to highlight those, like you all have done so beautifully in your interviews or whatever that looks like. And two, one thing that Viv said is that like no two first gen stories are the same. And I think that's an important note to remember. So maybe we'll get into this a little bit, but switching gears, in being first gen, often you're juggling multiple competing priorities, including not limited to family responsibilities, all of work, self-care, and so many more things. How do you balance it all? And how do you make time for yourself and your own mental health during that?
Okay, I'm gonna start because this is something that's deep to me, but this was one of the hardest things for me to be able to do, is this whole balance thing. And actually my supervisor, Ron Lawson, he also went to Holy Cross, and I would go to him all the time because I was like, my family is driving me crazy. Like, I don't know what to do. Like, I feel like, and even just me personally, I always made sure to prioritize my family. Like, my family's my family. I have to make sure that they have whatever they need. And they got too comfortable. I think they got too comfortable because because then I'm here in New York, and I'm like, you know what, I'm going to New York, and they're not gonna talk to me about their problems anymore. Yeah, okay, that's why there's a phone. So they would call me, and they would be like, and things that I can't even control. Like, I'm just like, these things, like, what do you guys expect me to do? To drive for 4 hours to handle your situation, drive back so that I can handle my own situation? So it was like a very like up and down battle with family. And then because I was so focused on them, I forgot about myself, and I forgot about the fact that I'm working full time. I'm going to school full time. I'm doing this, and that. I'm trying to have a social life. I'm trying to get myself together. So then I finally I was like, you know what? I'm cutting you guys off. Not literally, but I was like, I am gonna set these boundaries, and not because I don't love you guys. I do, but it's because I need to make sure that if I need to take care of myself, because if I don't take care of me, how will I ever be able to support you guys in any way possible? And that was one of the hardest things for me to do, because for me, I have such an emotional attachment with my family, of course, as many people do, but I feel like I always had to be there for them in every single way. So once I started to detach myself, and how I've learned to do it, because obviously just saying it is not, it's easier said than done, but what I did to be able to do that is not pick up the phone. If it's an emergency, I would know, because you will just text me, it's an emergency, pick up. Okay, I'll pick it up. Not pick up the phone, like, if they want to talk to me about something in particular, and I know that I don't have any business there, I'll be like, you know what? Actually, I don't want to hear it. And then once I started doing it slowly, they learned that it's like they have to separate themselves from me, because I was telling them, I was like, listen, like, you guys are important in my life, but the center in my life is me right now, because I'm also juggling a lot, and I'm also balancing a lot, and I also need to take care of my mental health. And just for anybody listening, like, your mental health is one of the most important things to take care of, because if you don't have your mental health, you don't have anything. Your mental health controls your physical, emotional, and any type of health that you have. So once I realized that, I was like, oh wow, like, and my family was a big factor in that. And once I was able to set boundaries there, I was able to set boundaries in other spaces, and then be able to just take care of more about take care of myself more. So that's like the number one thing that I would recommend. And yeah.
Yeah, I definitely piggyback off like what Yankari's saying, like especially because it's something that like I didn't do, right? Like I always just, like did my classes, like did my work, when I was with friends, like try to do everything. And when I look back on it, I didn't really like take care of myself that much. Like I thought I was, right? Like I thought I like gave myself the time to like do things that I like, do things that I wanted, right? But I never gave myself like that time and space to like think about how I was doing mentally and stuff. And now like, well, kind of like reflecting on everything, I'm like, I wish that I took care of my mental health better, right? Because now as like as an adult, I can tell like exactly what Young Kelly said, like it affects your mood, the way you act, the way you think. And when you're not like at your 100% or like even 50% best, like it's hard to get stuff done. But you still need to get up and do all the things you need to do, right? Even if it's just trying to get through that one day. And so in terms of like trying to learn how, because it's again something I was never taught, and I don't have anyone really to talk to about like my mental health. And it's kind of like that first gen, like, oh, I'm trying to figure things out. But take the time you need to like get away from everything and doing things that like are expected of you, like as a student, as a daughter or a son or a brother or sister. Like, take the time for you, and don't just do like, like everyone says, like, oh, like just like chill in bed and like watch Netflix and ordering some food, and that's great too. Like, you can do that, but like do other things, right, that like actually take care of you, like read or spend time outside, like spend time away from your phone, right? Like, you know, clean or like do a face mask, things that like will like actually like refresh you. Because I think like, it's something that I've started getting into, and like slowly I've, been able to tell that it does help. And, it goes a long way in being able, get yourself ready for the different days and, thriving.
Yeah, I feel like mental health, I think just from my personal experience at least, is almost like a taboo thing to kind of speak to when you're coming from a first gen family or a family of immigrants and stuff. It's something that's not really validated, and when you do talk about it, if you even have the courage to want to bring it up, is just kind of brushed away, and is something, and it's almost like it shows that you're vulnerable and they don't want to see that. And it's not something that they want to talk about either. So it's really tough because, kind of like what Dave was saying, like, you almost don't have the support. You don't even know, like, how do you actually manage your mental health? Like, what even is your mental health? And like, what are things that are affecting it and hurting it? Because kind of like what young Kelly was saying, like, my family is always number one to me. My friends are always number two, and I come third in my mind. It's always been like that for me. Even when I was in school, I would try and drop everything to go help my family, especially because I was so close to home. And like, being here, living at home, it's definitely just exacerbated it even more, because I'm like, well, my parents can literally walk up the stairs and I'm right here. It's not like they even have to call me at this point. And so I've realized during quarantine how much separation I do need from them, and how much that being around them has taken a toll sometimes on my mental health. I mean, I love my parents, don't get me wrong, they're amazing people, but like, sometimes the amount of stress they put on me, and just if I don't do something right away, or if I don't kind of do it the way they want to, or the way that they think is right, then it's just like an all out brawl at that point. And I'm just sitting here just like, I don't know what to do. I have no one to turn to at this point, because, I can't go to my friend's place. I can't like just call up anyone because I don't know what they're doing at home. So it's tough. But I think, other than also Netflix, grab a glass of wine if you're of age, eat some nice food, and just chilling, having a nice, relaxing day. Think just being able to take some time to reflect and take some time away from the stressors. And I know, at least for my job, they're really big on mental health. And so if I were to ever be like, I just can't do this, I'm really grateful that they'd be like, take the day off, like do whatever you need to do, go for a drive, go for a walk, do whatever you need to just take your mind off of things, listen to music. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely hard, and it's something that I still struggle with. I don't know. I don't have a nice work-life balance. I wish I could say I have a perfect grasp on my mental health, but I don't. There's times where I'm like, what is going on? And I just want to cry. And there's days where I'm so happy and everything's going perfectly. I'm like, wow, this is life right now. Like, I'm just thriving. But what I also find to be very helpful is talking to my friends who are in kind of the same shoes as me, where they might be, living with difficult home situations, or they might be first gen students, or they might be in school, or they're going through tough times too. And we kind of just bounce ideas off each other, and just venting, to me personally, is such a big stress reliever, and it's so good for me. And it really helps me just be able to think things through, because there's times where you might think that someone else is in the wrong, or someone else is really making you feel a certain way, but you actually are either making yourself feel that way, or you're kind of pushing them to make you feel that way almost. And so being able to talk through it and understand the situation, what's happened, and what can be a result of that, really helps. And it helps you take a step back and understand things from a bigger picture. And it's not just, it doesn't feel like it's just everything coming down on you all at once.
Kind of to piggyback off of what everyone was saying, something that's really, really triggering for me is my phone and social media, especially with all of the news regarding COVID or even the election, like I was really, really anxious, understandably so, leading up to the election because of everything I was seeing. I was really afraid of like violence after the results and everything like that. So for me, I think for my mental health, I really need to step away from my phone sometimes. And like that's hard to do when I'm finally like laying in bed at night and I just like want to catch up on the things that I've missed throughout the day. So I've kind of replaced it with reading. And I used to be like a really, really big reader in, middle and high school. And then life got so busy that I never really read for fun anymore. And then at Holy Cross, you read all the time, every single day, every second of every day. I just didn't really want to do it anymore, but through quarantine and everything like that. And I also have a baby at home and he likes to sleep on me. And so there's not much else I can do when he does that. But I found that losing myself into a book has been really helpful to kind of forget about all of the nonsense that's happening in the world as we go. And I think everyone else kind of addressed a lot of other important things already, so I'll just end that there.
Can I add something real quick? One thing that helps me get through anything is I remind myself that we are literally floating in a globe and we have absolutely no control. So when I'm walking and I'm like, oh, I can't believe this, I literally think about that and it just changes my perspective immediately because I'm like, we are literally humans, or we think we're humans in a globe floating in the middle of God knows what, because we don't know anything. We have so much that we can't control, but the one thing that we could control is our mindset. And I think that's like one of the most important things. And that's why I always continue to repeat this in my head, that we are literally on a globe, because our mental health is the one thing that we actually can't control. And sometimes we can't even control that. So like, might as well take care of yourself to that point that like you are the center of your own world, because you literally are, and focus on just you, because at the end of the day, whether you're here in this world or not, like that's you, and it's like it's your world, it's literally you in your head, and like, so just focus on that. And so for anybody listening, remember, we are on a floating globe. There's really not much we can control, so make sure you find that happiness within you, because that's it.
Appreciate that, Angeli. For students in the room, I want to encourage you, if you have a question, if you unmute yourself, we are recording, so if you feel comfortable, feel free to ask like that. Also, feel free to throw in the chat as well.
I don't have a question, but I just wanted to shout you all out. Thank you for doing this. Shout out to David for being my Odyssey mentor. He helped me through a lot my first year, so I appreciate it. And I've just been trying to be like you and give back, definitely. But yeah, I like resonated with a lot of what everyone said, and especially like I'm not at home because I can't like study at home, so I had to be on campus just because like it's just really tough to have the mental space and capacity to study with like, you know, like a Dominican mom and a Haitian dad, like especially, you know, the house is loud and like they just never went through like college, so I don't know like just how much of a grind it is and how much space it takes up mentally. So I just appreciate y'all sharing your experience.
I understand, because I live in a Dominican household and the loudness is just ridiculous. Like I just can't even concentrate sometimes. And I get you.
So if we don't have any other questions, I do want to just take the time, I want to respect the time that we have, and just thank so much the presenters who took time out of their night, especially with the year that we're going through it now. But it's so important to share stories, and we are grateful here at Holy Cross for you taking that time to share with us tonight. So thank you so much, and we look forward to staying connected.